far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Good day, everyone. I'm Donna Jones Simmons, co-author, co-founder, and the architect of 100 ABC Women Project. Today's conversation is about responding to stress in the workplace. Interesting topic. Dr. Cranla Warren and Michelle James, both professionals and experienced in this field, will share their knowledge and tactics that they have in their toolbox that they want to share with you on how to address these challenges. Here to moderate this fascinating discussion and help us gain some insights and helpful tips is Nicole Waldron. Nicole Waldron is a professional planner, event planner that is, inspirational speaker, author, community advocate, and host of Victory Speaks podcast. Over to you, Nicole.
Oh, thank you so much, Donna, the architect. Well, good day, everyone. And today I am speaking to you from the unceded and unsurrendered territories of many nations that has been cared for by generations of the First Nations, Inuit and Métis nations, and the land from which has been cherished, protected by the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. I am in Toronto. So we are going to be talking about stress. I need you to get ready to set the scene. So do you see what's happening behind me here? You see a little candlelight? That sets the mood. It has a nice scent. You know, I have something nice and warm around me so that I can touch if I feel a little stressed during the conversation. And I have this amazing glass of water. Yes, water is good because we have to hydrate, especially with stress. And this water is so special. This glass is so special because my friends gave it to me to remind me that I'm victorious. So as we settle in for this conversation now, you can see me and I can see you. So you can still get up and grab that glass of water, maybe a glass of wine. It's mid-afternoon, you know what I'm saying? Whatever makes you happy, because we are going to go on a beautiful ride. And at the end of it, we want you to be unstressed and ready for your week ahead. Today, we are going to tackle the conversation of chronic stress in the workplace, because stress is a normal reaction to everyday pressures that can become unhealthy when it upsets your day-to-day functioning. My guests, as you've heard, are Michelle James and Dr. Cranla Warren. But let me tell you a little bit, just a little bit, because let me tell you, they are supercalifragilisticexpialidocious women, and we've had great conversations. Michelle James is the Executive Vice President, People and Transformation at Scarborough Health Network, Ontario's third largest community hospital with over 6,000 staff. She has held senior leadership roles at this hospital for over 14 years and currently oversees several clinical programs for mental health, cancer care, and nephrology, as well as human resources, workplace wellness, EDI, and more. Michelle holds a Bachelor of Science in Human Biology, an MBA, and Certified Health Executive designation. She thrives on providing strategic leadership for breakthrough organizational transformation and cultural change. She has served on a number of boards and was selected as one of the 100 accomplished Black Canadian women in 2020. Dr. Cranla Warren holds a PhD in organizational psychology and a postgraduate certificate in professional leadership. She holds multiple graduate degrees across the disciplines of social work, philosophy, and psychology. Dr. Warren is currently Vice President of Leadership Development at the Institute for Health and Human Potential. She's a trusted advisor and respected peer to those who hold formal roles in human resources, learning and development, leadership and talent development, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. Cranla is also a former psychotherapist and family therapist, and she's worked in adult mental health in community hospitals for 8 years early on in her career. Currently, she's certified in mental health first aid, and Dr. Warren shares her knowledge through coaching leaders committed to fostering emotional intelligence, stress management, and mental health in the workplace. Dr. Cranler was selected as one of the 100 accomplished Black Canadian women in 2022. I'm just so glad to welcome you to the Sisterhood of 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women. Yay! And to the 100 ABC Fireside Chat on this wonderful Sunday afternoon. How are you ladies doing today?
Wonderful. Nicole, thank you. What a warm introduction for both Michelle and I feel so welcomed.
Listen, you guys made my day. I was looking forward to this today. And so, Michelle, let me ask you this. How was your day? Because Dr. Cranler is telling me how she's doing. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine, Nicole. I was really looking forward to sharing the stage today with Dr. Cranla and with you, of course, as our moderator. I think this is a really important topic for all women.
It truly is. So we're going in, people. Now it's Sunday and, you know, you've had a full week ahead. And I know, like me, it's been a stressful week, just knowing how we've been communicating, lots going on. Dr. Cranler, what would you say for stressful moments that showed up for you this week? How did you prepare to be here on a Sunday? Even, in fact, how do you prepare in the mornings to get your day going?
Yes, well, you know, Nicole, when I coach people, I often encourage them and invite them to start our session with a little bit of what I call breath work. And I'm going to offer that to you and Michelle and those who have joined us today, if you're open for a little bit of playing with the material, so to speak.
Of course.
And I'll invite you to, what I often do is really clear the space when I'm coaching someone for us to do good work together in the session and to support us to get present and in the moment. So the very simplest version, it can be done inside of a minute. And people often are like, a minute. And I say, yeah, we're going to do this for 1 minute.
Okay.
So I'll invite you to join me. Sitting up in your chair or on your couch or wherever you're sitting. And really, you've probably heard about deep breathing or belly breathing. We need to breathe in deeply for 4. And as we're inhaling, we have the word let echoing in our mind. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're thinking let, and then we hold it 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we exhale. And as we exhale, we let the word go echo in our mind. Go. So it looks like this. Let go.
Okay.
And doing this a few times, often what happens is we start to feel a release of tension. I know I often start to feel a release of stress from my neck and my shoulders. We may be feeling a little nervous. Michelle and I aren't used to doing this as you are, so we may still be feeling a little bit of stress, but often wherever we carry stress will start to dissipate. And the reason this is an important exercise is because stress and calm cannot coexist inside us at the same time. It's a neurobiological impossibility because of the different parts of the brain that get engaged. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But the whole idea is to take intentional breaths and really focus on what's happening in your body and breathing out the stress with a go. And often when I start my coaching sessions that way, I see people's faces change. I see their bodies often just relax and sort of sink more into their chair, and then they're ready to really be present and engage in the work that we need to do together.
Oh, that was so good. And for me, because you always think you have to sit down for long periods, and the fact that I can do that in a minute, and it's the first thing that I can do, even my naturopath, I got one of those now, Dr. Eby, and she said to me, Nicole, when you get up, sit in the sun, whether it's by the door, by the window, let the sun come in without your phone, Nicole, without the computer, and just sit and let it happen. Michelle, how did you prepare? How did you go through this weekend and release your stress?
Boy, I kind of wish I could carry Dr. Cranla around with me
I
to
know.
remind me, because breathing does make such a big difference. You know what? I get a lot of satisfaction and calm, to use that word, from my family. I FaceTimed with my daughter and my grandchildren this morning, and that always puts me in a good mood. And 7 days a week, I start every single morning at 7 a.m. with a prayer group. And I've been doing that for almost 2 years. We started during the pandemic, and we do that 7 days a week. And that really helps me to start my day in the right frame of mind with inspiration.
I love that. I love that. And I kind of do the same thing. One of my things that I do is that I try my best, unless I have to, no meetings before 10. Because that's the part where I'm getting myself together. I'm getting grounded with my prayer, with my quiet time, and sometimes just being with me. So it's so important how we start your day. And so I'll ask the audience, give us some ideas of how you're starting your day. Or even if you are thinking about starting your day in a stressful way, that could be key. And so as I say that, Dr. Cranler, let's talk about stress, because everybody has their idea of what stress is. What is stress?
Yes, I think that's important for us to sort of set the foundation. So as we talk about how does it show up and how are we managing it, we have a general understanding of what it is. So really it's very dynamic, and it's our body's reaction to a perceived threat or a problem or a demand or a situation that requires us to take action. And it manifests itself emotionally, as we talked about, physically, in terms of in our body, shoulders, back, neck is often where we would feel it. And if it goes on for too long, it can present as a medical concern. Especially for Black women, we are at high risk of heart disease and stroke, and often stress can be a precipitator of that medical condition. So, the other thing I think that's important about stress is there's different kinds of stress. We often talk about there's distress, right? It's associated with negative emotions. So we might feel distressed when we get laid off, for example, or go through a divorce, or if we get a diagnosis of an illness, there's an experience of distress that we feel. And those are triggers that they impact us emotionally and physiologically and psychologically. And they can tap, our internal resources. And then mostly when we say stress, what we're talking about is acute stress. That's where we experience like an intense, time limited, comes on quickly experience. And this is a response that's sudden, it might be unexpected. It might even be, a response to a life-threatening type of an event. When we think about, I was with my grandchildren this past week. So you think about a child falling and hurting themselves potentially, we jump into action. That's a stress reaction. And the body responds neurochemically and biologically. And most people have heard about fight or flight, right? That's what's promoting us to act quickly, to create a safer situation for ourselves. And our body gets flooded with neurochemicals and with hormones. And many of us have heard about cortisol. Some of us have heard about adrenaline. And those are designed to gear up our bodies to take action for survival. So, one of the extreme examples are when you see in the news that there's a mom who like lifts a car off of a child who's been trapped under it or something. That's an example of in the moment stress. Our body is prompted by adrenaline and cortisol to take action. And then when the stressful event is over, what happens to us is the hormones and the neurochemicals, they dissipate, and our body can return to normal and to a status quo level. Now, I think what we're talking about more today is more about chronic stress. And that's where our body and our brain experience something that's more toxic. It's longer lasting, it's ongoing. And our stress response that we talked about that should come and go, it's activated for too long. It goes on over time. And this could be, like a grinding worry about work, a grinding anxiety about paying bills on a monthly basis. And we want to try to address stress, not ignore it or brush it off because of the long-term effects it can have. So when we're still releasing this adrenaline and cortisol bit by bit, because we're in this perpetual stress, it takes a toll on us. And these chemicals that come are supposed to help us in the moment, but then when they're with us every day, it can cause lots of, we'll talk about this today, it can cause lots of impacts around our brain, our body, our ability to be in relationships. So that's what I would say, sort of starting us off around, the different types of stress that we experience.
It's funny, you kept mentioning cortisol and the brain. And before I ask my other question, I really want to tap into this brain piece because I don't think people get the correlation between the brain and the mind, and that the stress is part there. Because in my humble opinion, and talking to people in dealing with mental health and being a mental health advocate, people don't realize your brain is so much a part of your mental health and wellness. Can you give us just a little touch on that? I know it's a big conversation. We may have to have that big conversation another day, but can you just touch on that? Because you talk about the cortisol and the pathways.
Yeah. So essentially our brain, and this is very simplistic, but you have an emotional part of your brain, which is the limbic system. And then you have the neocortex, which is that cognitive part of your brain. And when you are in that fight or flight stress mode for too long and the neurochemicals are being released, the cognitive part of your brain that makes decisions, that can explore options, it can't work. So we have brain fog, for example. We become forgetful. And cortisol is also something that contributes to weight gain. So often people will say, I'm stress eating. We're not eating healthy things for ourselves. Yes. So really keeping being mindful that we need to mitigate the impacts of adrenaline and cortisol by trying to intersect the stress before it becomes too full blown and really takes over, where our emotional brain is in the driver's seat most of the time. And we're in that fight or flight mode, but there's nothing to really fight or flee from. And it's just releasing these chemicals and what becomes toxins into our body.
Bless you.
Yeah, bless you.
Sorry, I didn't hit mute fast enough. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That was a stressful sneeze.
Yeah, it was.
I love that. But you see, this is what you do. This is the greatness of doing live. And you were talking about the stress, the brain. And so before we get into some more of this, because Michelle, you're faced with dealing with so many employees as well as you, Dr. Cranler. But what's the difference between stress and burnout? Because I can personally tell you, I know the other day I had to pause. I had to pause because I felt something, and I said, if you don't, even in the midst of having the podcast and stuff, and I was thinking, oh, I could lose viewers and all, like, I had to pause. What is that difference that people may not even realize that they're about to hit burnout? Can you share
Right.
with us?
Sure. Yeah, that's something that we have had to explore in a fair amount of detail, being a hospital. And the hospital environment has always been stressful. But during the pandemic, I think we really saw a special kind of stress and burnout emerge. And we define burnout as really a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. And it's often related to the job itself. So we have some, and you're right, people don't always recognize when it's happening. It could creep up on you. And burnout doesn't happen overnight. But people don't always recognize the symptoms. We have a checklist that we use with our staff, and I'll just refer to that. But we have 7 questions we call the burnout checklist, and we say, are you feeling irritable, tired, or discouraged? Do you avoid your coworkers, call in sick more often, or think about quitting? Have you lost your enthusiasm for your job? Do you feel unappreciated for your contribution at work? Are you having trouble concentrating? Do you think that your productivity is low? And number 7 is, are you bringing stress home with you? And what we have, those 7 questions, we say that, if you've answered yes to more than 5 of them, reach out and get some support. And we have a number of supports at our organization that I'll come to later. But some of the common reasons that employees experience in relation to burnout are an extremely heavy workload all the time, like not just, you had to work, late one night or the odd weekend. This is prolonged, heavy workload, no work-life balance. And that means a different work-life balance is different for everyone, right? An extremely stressful or distressing line of work, unrewarding or directionless work, no recognition from management, no support from your team or management. And another one that we talk about a lot is misaligned values in the workplace. No autonomy or discriminatory or toxic work environment. All those are some key reasons why someone might experience burnout in relation to work.
Thank you for that, and I love that list, and we have to definitely get that list from you, and we have to post that list because I think those are good questions for one to check in. As you said that list, Dr. Cranler, when we were talking about stress, I wish you were my doctor, anyways. But you can't have your friend as a doctor. That's what it is.
And I'm not a medical doctor, Nicole.
Yeah, no, but you can still be there, counseling me on the side. I'm grappling here, hoping. But what does stress feel like and look like? How does it show up in the body? Because there are signs that people may not actually notice that it's a stress or even burnout.
Yes, I will come to that. One of the things that I love about what Michelle said was she talked about the pandemic and how burnout became almost it became endemic, right? It became almost its own pandemic on top of the pandemic. And the interesting thing is that burnout was first described in the 1970s. But it wasn't until 2019 where it started to get more defined. And that's when it became defined as, a syndrome. I won't get all of the words correct, but it was like a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that hasn't successfully been managed. And that's when the World Health Organization classified it as an occupational hazard and an occupational phenomenon. Yes.
2019.
Yes. And it's not classified as a medical condition. It's classified as a workplace condition, although it does have medical implications. So I loved the way that Michelle was describing that, how they brought it into the workplace, because everything on that checklist really related to how they were doing as an individual and managing their stress at work. Because burnout is a workplace syndrome. It's not considered a medical condition, even though it's marked by feelings of, your energy being depleted and exhaustion, as Michelle said. The other things that happen are just sort of have negative feelings about your job. And some people, what they do is they start to create a mental distance from their work, or they become more cynical. And the other thing that Michelle talked about, which is bang on, is that sense of feeling a lack of agency. So that whole, you don't feel like you're productive on your job anymore. You don't have an ability to cope. So I think this is really important as we look at stress. If we learn to manage stress, then we can buffer from getting to the point of burnout. And I think that that's really one of the high points that I want to stress as we discuss this today, because when we talked about how does it show up, unfortunately, it has become accepted part of work life when we talk about stress. Managers seem to feel like we should be, on call 24/7. You had talked about your phone, and sometimes people feel, well, my boss wants me to prioritize my work over my family. And there's a lot of research that's going on right now, which is great, about the workplace. So we get more and more information. And I think, some of the things that come up around how does it look? I think the most alarming statistic is almost 50% of people said they stopped caring about work. They were disengaged and they started to check out due to stress at work. And you may have heard about the term quiet quitting.
Yes,
and
the
that's
quiet quitting is big.
Right. So really that's related to stress. And Michelle also mentioned like not being aligned, your personal values not being aligned with what's going on in the workplace. So people are expecting more from themselves and from their workplaces.
Right.
So quiet quitting doesn't mean you don't show up to work. It means you don't do any overtime, you don't put on any extra effort. You're actually setting boundaries and not managing and trying to manage an unmanageable workload. So, when we talk about how does it show up, what do we feel? I think it's really important because we've talked a little bit about some of the physiological and the mental, the brain fog, those kinds of things. And if we don't manage it, we can push ourselves into, we started talking about this before, heart disease. We can start pushing ourselves into high blood pressure. We might cause ourselves to have a stroke. And not that I'm blaming us, but these are some of the precipitating things that can happen because of living under, this veil and pounding stress.
Yeah, you said so much there. And then I also think about the brain fog, that it starts showing up, the brain fog, when you're talking about the burnout. And even though we're not going to get into this, it's too tough today, I would want to say to people, if you're having thoughts of not wanting to be here anymore, if you're having any suicidal ideation, that is so big. And people, you don't know what's going to happen, because this pandemic did one of the good things this pandemic was it allowed people to talk about mental health and wellness in a place of some of us being able to not have some of the stigma. Yet still, we are feeling the pressure at work, where people want us to do more and they're quiet quitting. So Michelle, you are dealing with, in a really unique space of the medical staff, nurses, doctors, every type of person in that medical space. And so how are you and the team at the network able to help them deal with the stress and support them in the workplace? And I think this would apply to anybody else. So I'm saying tune in. If you know anybody right now who is going through stress in the workplace, you better send them a text and tell them, come on, tune in to this conversation, because they need it. Okay, go, Michelle.
No, thank you, Nicole. That's a great question. And to be honest, how to deal with that was something that caused me personal stress. That was the thing that kept me up at night. And but what was really important in our environment was even before the focus on wellness and well-being, there was a huge physical safety component. I worried that that someone would get sick or die from COVID,
Right.
in the beginning. And what kept me up at night was, how do I keep all of these people safe, right? In terms of, masking and PPE, protective personal equipment, and social distancing, and all of these things. But then we quickly realized that that all of that is essential, but it's not enough. You really do have to look at the stress and burnout impact. And we did a lot, to be honest. And I think the main thing is for senior decision makers to acknowledge that this is a thing,
Yes.
that there is a really good business case, even, sorry to use that term, for focusing on wellness. It cuts down on absenteeism, it increases productivity, it increases morale, it just makes for a better workplace all around. So I was really fortunate to work in an organization that got that, and really valued employee wellness and physician wellness. So we made some early investments. One of them I alluded to earlier, when the checklist that I was reading from is a brochure that our spiritual and religious care department put together. And that's a department that you would find in most hospitals. And they're there primarily to serve the needs of patients and families. But what we saw during the pandemic was this department went from seeing a few staff members a month, about 40, to over 400 were coming to spiritual care. So a lot of people were going there just to have someone to talk to, someone that would listen. And all of my spiritual care practitioners are also registered psychotherapists. So they knew how to manage that, but that's a pretty high volume. And they were coming with issues of, anger, frustration, fear, issues at home. Mental health issues were prevalent amongst young people with children, with spouses that maybe were not working anymore. People were just so many things were going on in the lives of people that they wanted to come and talk to us about. And then we also have wellness coordinators, and I love them. They just, they went around 7 days a week to all of our patient care areas and did exactly what Cranla did with us at the beginning. So take a break. Just we know you're busy. We know you're stressed. We know you're running around saving lives, but take a break. And people would take even just 3 to 5 minutes to stretch or dance sometimes. And when we followed up with our staff, they found that really valuable. And of course, we had things like lots of information, websites, guest speakers, lots of resources for people. And the focus on leadership was really important, because as you said earlier, we have 6,000 staff. And what people value most is thanks and recognition from their direct supervisor. It's not enough for me as an executive vice president to say thank you. People want to hear that from the person that they report to, the person that they work closely with. So we really spent a lot of time giving leaders these resources and tools and techniques that they could use to manage stress and burnout amongst their teams. And we encourage them to practice self-care, because if they could role model self-care behaviors, then people would see that. And we want them to walk the talk, right? And not say, oh, we value work-life balance and well-being, but then they never take vacation, or, they work all hours of the night. So we really wanted to support our leaders. And those are just a few of the things that we did, Nicole.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that are coming up for me, if I can just jump on that, because,
on that train for sure.
yeah, going through the pandemic, we had so much, care. We were hanging our red hearts for frontline healthcare workers. And hearing you speak, Michelle, it's really bringing me back to, they are human beings too. So when we show up, we talk about stress and how that's showing up. They're going into the hospital to care for people who are sick. We know that stress creates an inflammatory response in the body. So they're under stress and they're at risk for chronic infections, right? They're at risk for all these things that we're talking about, anxiety and depression. They're at risk for feeling irritable and fatigued. And so I think it's really important for us to to recognize how does it show up, and you were sharing that, and I love a lot of what you were talking about that you did as an organization to support. I do a lot of work in the corporate space, and I hear from people who are experiencing stress that just what you said, it negatively affects them at home on a daily basis. I hear things like, I lost my temper and snapped at somebody at work, and I've never done that before. The quality of my work has suffered.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that keep coming up. I can't focus. I don't have the same kind of judgment. I procrastinate. So it's really important, if people are out there listening to this, if you're experiencing any of this, I would ask you to pause and reflect and maybe ask yourself the question, might you be experiencing some of the impacts of being under stress?
Absolutely.
And to yourself.
And sorry, Nicole, and just one other piece just to build on that is we really try to empower people and give them sustainable ways of managing stress or addressing burnout. And we have a model that we call the 3 R's, and the first R is recognize.
Okay.
Recognize that you have an issue. And so one of the things that we did, because we're a hospital, we have a psychiatry department, and our psychiatrist actually came to us and helped us to put together a survey tool, a screener that we issued every 2 weeks to all staff that wanted to use it to screen for anxiety and depression. And then depending on your score, a list of resources would pop up, giving you some advice on what to do. But we could then look at that. We could look at how a particular department has scored, and then target resources to work with an entire team. So the first R is recognize. The second R is reverse, which means get the support or access the resources to try to undo or reverse the stress and burnout that you're feeling. And the third R, surprisingly, is resilience. So what can you do to make this a sustainable solution? So what can you do in terms of things with regards to your physical health, your mental health, emotional health in a sustained way so that you'll be more resilient?
So I love all of that. And one of the things I'm going to pull on what you said as well is, what are you saying to yourself? Because sometimes we're showing up angry and disgruntled, or even not so kind to others. But what are you saying to yourself when you get up, or even throughout the day? Are you hard on yourself, and are you showing yourself the same compassion that you need to show others? So the same way that you checked on everybody else, please check on yourself. And I love these 3 words: recognize, reverse, resilience, and the screening part of it. And I would say to employers, because we want this not to just be a conversation, we want this to be a conversation of action as well for ourselves and as others. Take this into your workplace. How can you reverse it? Support. If you have benefits, we know this is a big time of the year because everybody's using out their benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you have benefits, take advantage of it. And it's private. Once you're dealing with any type of benefits, especially when it comes to mental health and wellness, do it. Go for the massage, people. You don't have to go to a fancy, expensive place. Get the massage, because at the end of the day, you want that resilience. And sometimes we think about resilience that I have to be this strong person. Strength shows up when we are vulnerable. And earlier in the conversation, Dr. Cranler, you were talking about women, and I think about Black women in particular. I was at some board meetings this weekend, and I had a young Black woman sitting down next to me, and I could tell she wasn't doing so well. And I was like, "Are you okay?" No. And then it came out in the break. She said, "I slipped and I fell outside." And I'm like, "Why are you here?" And then she says, "I'm feeling some eye pressure," because she's sitting there with me with shades on. I'm like, "Why are you here? You can go to your hotel room and zoom in, but she felt the guilt of being at a meeting. And I said, just go zoom in, put on the glasses, you can listen in. And if you're not feeling well enough, it's okay. She says, and her sentence to me was, we're women, we're strong Black women. And I'm like, and what does that really mean? So let's talk about these strong Black women, because we're 100 ABC women. What do you both have to say to showing up as this strong Black woman?
Yeah, I'd love to comment on that. I think that there's often this sometimes unconscious belief, but this person spoke it, that we need to be doing, we need to be hustling, we need to be strong, we need to be constantly caretaking, and usually we're caretaking of others and not so much ourselves oftentimes.
Right.
And I think it's really for us to recognize this for ourselves as a start. I mean, you were providing feedback and an opportunity for this person to have the conversation. And in the workplace, we're often working in systems that aren't built for us. They're not designed for us to succeed, quite honestly. You've heard of the glass ceiling. Well, we often get stuck at the first broken rung on the ladder. We're often like invisible in organizations. And I know that sounds harsh, but the data shows us that, you know, Black women don't get tapped for mentorship and sponsorship. They don't get promoted as much as their white male and female counterparts. And Black women often get stuck at an individual contributor level, which may be below their capability and working themselves to the bone nonetheless, right? And this in of itself is very, very stressful. And then when you add on to that things like microaggressions, showing up in the workplace and feeling that you have to code switch, right? Changing the tone of your voice or your diction or your mannerisms or the way that you dress to fit in, all of this creates this emotional tax that we carry, that we pay when we show up at work every day, just trying to navigate our careers, make a living, you know, and do the best we can, like many, many other people who are working. And this emotional tax is a very heightened experience, more often because we are seen visibly as different from our peers because of our sex, because of our race, and we still continue to, you know, work hard and to thrive. So I would say, you know, the organizational response needs to be to do what I call go treasure hunting in your organization, like purposely find people like this young woman who has this worry that she needs to keep working hard to be seen as strong. Don't have her working herself to the bone. Go in and treasure hunt for her, cherry pick for her. You may not see that person because they may not be loud and prominent and as visible as some other people in the organization. And then actually hold leaders accountable for engaging in these equitable ways in terms of the processes around who gets developed, who has these performance conversations and opportunities. I often say, you know, in organizations, we grow who we know. So if your leader doesn't know you and you're a hardworking Black woman, that's a problem. And then we as Black women, we want to thrive in the workplace. Right. And we do, you know, one of the things that I work on with people I coach is really helping them to learn how to emotionally and socially and behaviorally handle the microaggressions and racism. Not that that's ideal. I'm not saying that that's what we should be doing, but right now it's what we need to learn with emotional and social skills. At the same time, staying true to our values when we're facing pressure to conform. And I think it's important for us to commune with others like we are here to be able to combat isolation and have those conversations that matter. And then the last part I'd say is sort of on the organizational systems piece. It's important for us as Black women to learn how to contribute in ways that will result in transforming these traditional systems of work that we've been striving and trying and to work within that haven't been designed for us.
So good, so good. And so, Michelle, what would you say to the strong Black woman?
I agree with everything that Cranla said, and I'm still learning how to get past that. You know, it's something that impacts me as well. So I'm learning about that. But one of the things that we do at our organization is we really try to create an environment and a culture where people can bring their whole self to work. So you're a nurse, but you're also a woman. You're also Black. You're also a single mom. You're also 100 other things, right? So we're really trying to acknowledge that. So one of the things that we have in place is something called communities of inclusion, which are employee relation groups. So members that identify with a particular demographic or a particular interest, they can come together in a safe space. But what I really want those groups to do when they come together in a safe space is yes, they can talk about issues and share solutions, but also do exactly what you said. Give us some feedback on
Yes.
changes that we can make to transform the organization. So we formed our first community of inclusion in 2019, and it was for our 2S LGBTQ plus community. And it's called Pride. Our hospital is Scarborough Health Network, so SHN Pride. Then in January 2020, and I'm so glad that we did this because it was not a reactive thing. This was a intentional part of our plan and investment. In January 2020, we created our Black employee group, which is called BUILD, Blacks United for Inclusion, Leadership, and Development.
I love
So
it.
when the pandemic was declared in March, we already had BUILD.
Something in
Then
place.
2 months later, when our staff that were already so stressed and nervous and scared about the pandemic went home to watch on TV the murder of George Floyd in May. And so we were able to really leverage this group and create a safe space for, I think I had about over 40 employees that came together on short notice just to talk about how we were feeling.
Right.
But to end with, what do you think we should do? What should the senior team do? How can we support you? So we put some strategies in place. I brought in some external experts, and I collected stories. We collected stories from the Black employees about some of the things that they experience, everything from the microaggressions to, staff that tell us, I feel like I have to kind of walk around with my credentials in my pocket all the time, to prove to people that I'm really a nurse or I'm the charge nurse and they really shared everything about comments about hair and earrings and so many things. And we captured those so that we could use those in training for leaders to really understand what our staff were dealing with. So that group BUILD is fantastic. They continue to meet on a regular basis. They have a webpage on our corporate intranet where they collect information. They have events, and I'm just so excited and proud of them. And the third group that we created just this year in 2022, we've called HOPE, HOPE, helping our parents excel. And so this is a group for working parents, because that is family issues and worrying about, your kids are everything, right? And you can't just turn that off when you come to work. So people worrying about their children and schools being open, or they're online and then they're not, and mental health and wellness issues affecting our kids who are so isolated. So we really felt that needed to be our next group to recognize. And so we're getting that off the ground now. But it's really, I think, creating that sense of we see you. And, we see that you're Black, and that's, a Black woman, and that you may have some specific things going on, or you would benefit from a safe space
Right.
to share, or maybe our policies need to be tweaked to address specific needs.
I really thank you for addressing the employer piece as well, because, so many employers do not understand how Black women have to show up. And so it's one thing to be the strong Black woman. We come from a culture where we've had to be from 200 years ago, more than that, from slavery. We've been really having to show up. We always have to do the things, and we have to take care of family, and we have to take care of somebody else's family, and then a mother becomes a grandmother. So we're always showing up, and then we have to show up at work. And to the women out there listening, I hope you're really hearing this, that you have to pause. You have to pause to take care of self and recognize that the strong Black woman doesn't always have to be on. Sometimes you have to say no to others to say yes to yourself. And to the employers, recognize that as you have Black employees, whether they're Black males or Black women, or they identify, they have a different gender identification. When you are Black and you show up to work, you see this first, you see this color first. And that in itself is stressful. But we come with cultural nuances. And I'm so glad that you spoke to that. Your organization, Michelle, is putting those checklists in place and the formulas in place. And it's not going to be done overnight, but creating a safe and welcoming space for people to speak. And I'm just going to read a couple comments in the chat. Joan Pierre says, this is why the change must come from the top in the corporation and organizations. Otherwise, not much change will come about. But there's a climate present that we have to take advantage of right now and speak out and not be afraid. It will help many fight in the long run. Ucheche says, these are such crucial conversations to have. And thank you. And thank you. Keep these comments coming. If you have a question, we're going to go for probably another, let me say 30 minutes or so. So keep them coming, because we want this to be a sustainable conversation, a conversation that gives you, the food for your day, the food for your soul. I see, the great Mary Clark Walker is showing up here in the chat. She's a champion, a union activist. I always like success stories. One such as the Elementary Teachers of Ontario. They do breakaway weekend seminars, or at least used to prior to COVID. A place where women can go away from home and workplace. That's powerful. And listen to labor and campaign info, but also do something that they enjoy, like yoga, knitting, and glass making. That is amazing, because we have to create these places where you can step out of work and pause in the midst of the work. Now, Dr. Cranler, you said something there that I had never heard of before: emotional tax. I am writing that one down. What is the emotional tax that you are paying for your health and wellness? That was so good. Now, early in the discussion, we talked about work-life balance. Dr. Cranler, is there really such a thing as work-life balance?
We hear that term a lot, don't we?
Yeah, they toss it.
Yeah. Sorry?
They toss it around a lot. So let's see.
Yes, it is tossed around a lot. So I think I would start by saying, if I start at the research, which is what I do, there's at least 40% of people that say they can't manage their workload within regular working hours. And then a third of people, when we started talking about this before, they believe that their boss wants them to be always on, 24/7, and prioritize work over family. So when we talk about balance in a scenario like that, balance implies that we have equal weighting. We have equal weighting for work, and we have equal weighting for family. And these days it just doesn't work. There is no balance. I think we talk more now about integration. So work-life integration or work-life harmony. How can we be present where we need to be when we need to be there? How can we be present and manage our households? How can we be present with and for our children? How can we be present with and for our intimate partner relationships, or our aging parents who we might have to take to an appointment in the middle of the day?
Yes.
Right? Can we set boundaries around our work and boundaries around our family life, where it's not so much balance, but there's an integration and there's a flow that for everybody looks different, but allows us to feel like we're meeting our own personal needs and family needs and still showing up at work to do the work that needs to be done. It might mean, taking a break from your workday, going and taking an elderly parent to an appointment, and then saying, I've been away for a couple of hours. After dinner, I'm going to get on my computer and I'm going to finish that up. So that's that integration or the harmony versus looking at it more as a balance, because there is no consistency of equal time. I think I would call it a myth. I think work-life balance is more of a myth. And now we look at what's the harmony that works for each one of us.
I love that, because I think it's a myth too, as me personally. I really do think it's a myth. And, communication is key. We're talking about it. So I'm feeling the stress, whether you're in a medical field, whatever you are, if you're a mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, stress is showing up, life is showing up. So I need to communicate this to my employer. But we know in the real world out there, unless you have some really empathetic employers, it can be perceived as you're being weak or you're not pulling your weight. And I want to ask both of you, what are some suggestions as how we can communicate to our employers that maybe it's the languaging, maybe it's or work or fellow workmates, because some people say, I don't have the empathy for them because I got my own stuff going on. How do we show up as our authentic selves, be truthful, and say, I need help? How do we do that? Michelle and Dr. Cranler. Michelle, let's go.
Should I start there?
Go ahead, Michelle.
I think it's really important, as I said earlier, to have a good relationship with your supervisor to the extent that you can. And some people don't always feel comfortable sharing personal information with their supervisor about their family life. But I find that when people are able to negotiate the kind of work relationships that they need, it's because they have actually communicated what their needs are, and their supervisor has tried to help them. It might be scheduling, flexibility or certain days off and those kinds of things. I know that that has helped me throughout my career, which included, I don't know, 17 years as a single mom,
Mm,
working in the private sector. And I just told my boss, this is my situation. My daughter is just outside of the school bus zone, so, and I'm not going to have her walk to and from school. So it was but that's the job allowed me to do that, to have that flexibility in terms of when I came in and when I left. But it was, the conversation was, what, this is not going to impact my productivity and my performance. I will get everything done. It's just I need some flexibility to get it done on my terms, my time. So that often meant, being with the kids after school and getting them dinner, getting them to bed. And then I was so calm and peaceful, knowing that I had taken care of my children, that I could then sit down and check emails or do things a little bit later into the evening. So that's just me. In terms of work-life balance, I've always valued the flexibility, and
right,
I've chosen a job that allows me to do that. That doesn't apply, to be honest, to most of the
right.
staff that work at the hospital. I'll give you an example in terms of the ability to work from home, remote work. Only 5% of our workforce had
Yeah,
that ability,
yeah,
right?
right.
But so most of them don't. So we have to look for other ways. We can't always provide that scheduling flexibility, but leaders have to be understanding
Hmm.
and compassion. Compassion is one of our values. Inclusion is one of our values. So we have to lead with compassion and try to be as flexible as possible. There's always solutions. And it's just having, and we have to give our leaders the permission to come up with innovative solutions and be okay with that, rather than this, we have to treat everyone exactly the same, and collective agreements, and there's all these rules. And the best thing is that I actually don't have a human resources background, so I get to ask all those dumb questions like, why do we do it that way? Like, that doesn't make sense. And I don't have that framework. I come at it more from a cultural change kind of a background. But we do have nurses as our largest employee group, and I can only imagine, what they go through. So we try to come up with things like these community of inclusions and recognition and supports and thank yous. But I think it's really about compassion and trying to be as flexible as we possibly can, given that we have patients to look after, right? We do have
Yeah.
some restrictions.
I love that, Michelle, because
Mhm,
you spoke not just to the question of how you can approach it. You're
mhm.
speaking to the employers, and I love that you said lead with compassion. And as leaders, you have to lead with compassion. And some people may not have it, so we may actually have to put training for our leaders in place to
Mhm.
have how to lead with empathy, how to show up, because you might actually think you're being an empathetic leader and you really are not. And there's
Mhm.
certain languaging that we need to use that does not make a person feel guilty.
Yes.
Yeah, I tell you
And
this.
and could I just, you just tweak me to one thing, Nicole, sorry, and then I'll stop. So we try to take a really broad view of diversity at our hospital. And when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, in those spaces, there's often a focus on women, which is much needed. But the other day, last Wednesday, because this is the month of November, which we call Movember, and the focus on men's health, my wonderful workplace diversity and inclusion specialist, she had a focus on masculinity. And we actually had one of our male nurses present, because it was so eye-opening, because when you hear nurse, there's still that stereotype that it's a woman,
Yes.
and they live with that. And they were able to share we have a lot of male nurses, they were able to share some of the stereotypes that they have to maneuver, and also even some of the things that they've grown up with, their fathers, and how masculinity was kind of ingrained, like these traditional views of masculinity, which includes, as you were saying, not speaking up
Yeah.
when things are too hard, not sharing that you're experiencing emotional stress, or that you need a break, or those kinds of things. So it was a real eye-opener to kind of hear that perspective, because and this is why we have to drill down about people bringing their whole self to work. It's not, all nurses are not the same, and now this kind of special lens on male nurses. And when we overlaid on that Black male nurses, that was actually who our main speaker was, then you get into more kind of intersectionality issues and stereotypes. But we really have to listen to those diverse voices as best we can. And it's not a cookie cutter approach. We can't do the same thing for everybody.
And you used a key word there, listen.
Mhm.
Because so many people say they want you to talk, but they're not really prepared to listen. And so there's a skill to listening, and there's a skill to hearing. And after we share, especially as BIPOC individuals, and I'm going to speak especially to Black women, sometimes we can feel dismissed. Sometimes, somebody says, yes, say what you need to say. And then after you say what you need to say, they move on. And we say to employers, and if I'm hearing you correctly, you need to listen and take action. You need to listen. And what do we do next? And so I'm going to bring that same question back to you, Dr. Cranla, in terms of communicating, because you're dealing with all sorts of organizations and you're seeing the challenges. What are some, if we can give some key communication tips or some verbiage that employees can share with their employers, it's too much, I need a break. How do I communicate that?
Yeah, so I have two examples, and I love that in the chat, Donna talked about empathy, Michelle talked about compassion, and Nicole, you talked about listening. So the first thing I'll say is at the Institute for Health and Human Potential, we teach emotional intelligence to leaders. Those are the skills they need to learn as core competencies of being an exceptional leader. And I can give an example of what I hope that looks like. So in October, I had a young woman, single mom, reporting to me for the first time. And we schedule meetings, we try to leave breaks in between. And we had a meeting that was scheduled to go from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And it was a Zoom call, so she could have been doing it from home. And as we're having a conversation about scheduling, and I'm talking to her about her workload and asking the question and listening, how is she managing things? I said, okay, I'll see you this afternoon at 3. And she got really uncomfortable. I let that go by. In our next one-on-one, I said, I noticed that you got really uncomfortable when I talked about, the meeting, and you showed up on the meeting and everything seemed fine. She says, well, I have to pick up my sons at 3. I have my 3 sons.
Right.
And so if all of these different meetings are going to run from 3 to 4, it's going to be hard for me to find someone to pick them up. And that's really, was stressing her out. So I said, oh, these meetings are flexible. Let's look at this. I'm facilitating. I'm the chair of the meeting. Let's look at the calendar and find a time that works for you. We don't have to tell everybody because you're going out to pick up your sons. That's none of their business. So we moved the meeting. And everything was fine. So I think as leaders, we need to tune into those things. We need to ask those questions, and we need to care about the fact that someone's experiencing stress. I could have gone, well, it's not a problem for me because I don't have kids at home. My kids are all grown. No, I remember what that felt like as a single parent and not having someone else who could consistently be my backup. So that's the leader side. On the employee side, I'm going to use a personal situation, which is me. I report directly into the president of the Institute. And I'm going to use something that I actually teach, which is SBIN. It's situation, behavior, impact, and next steps. So in terms of communication, I offer this to folks. You may want to play with it in your own situation. So here's the situation. Here's the S. I have taken on additional workload and responsibilities for a vacant position. There's a director role that's vacant under me, and it's been very recent, but we have to decide what's going to happen to it because there's transformation in the organization. We don't know if we'll have that role or something else. And one of the other vice presidents is currently on a leave. I've mentioned to my boss before many times, I don't have bandwidth to take on anything more at this time. I've listed what I have going on, and I have more than my normal load, and I'm
Right.
doing my best to manage my stress level and this workload. And here's my plan. I'm working in a very deliberate way. You can look at my calendar, you can see what's booked there, and I'm getting through to like December 19th when my year-end break will start. So that's the situation. The behavior was in this, when I'm talking to him, I said, in the senior team meeting this morning, you asked me to take on 3 additional activities, all of them having deadlines between now and the end of the year. And
Wow.
Nicole, you've mentioned to me, which is so true, that when people present as capable and competent, what happens? They get more work.
Yep.
And if you don't speak up about your load, your load being over here, then and you suffer in silence, it's going to continue coming to you and continue coming to you. So my behavior was to speak to him privately, not in the meeting, but privately, but say, here's what happened. Then I talk about the I, which is impact.
Right.
I say, I've been okay to take on this extra load for now. That was our agreement, because it's time limited, it's not forever, and I found my own way to manage this. If I take on anything else, I fear I'm going to crack under the pressure. And I'm not prepared to sacrifice my health that way. I'm already carrying too much. So the N is then next steps. I said, my request is that next week we look at my workload together and these expectations for the next 3 weeks. And we're going to have to prioritize this. There's some things that will not get done by the end of the year. So we need to talk about what needs to be done by me. What can be delegated? To whom can that be delegated? What is truly realistic for me to get done in this 3-week time frame? So this, when I'm coaching people, I use this model as well, because it's not emotional, it's very fact-based and it's very solution-oriented. And at the end of the day, I'm not prepared to sacrifice my health for additional stress that's being created for me outside of me. So I think sometimes having a bit of a roadmap can help us to have those communications.
I am capping you over here. I'm like, that was so good. Like, you take it back. This is the situation. Let's solve this together. Look at the timeline. Let's be realistic. And you come with me and set those priorities, because this is how much time is in a day. Oh my gosh, that was fact-based, not emotional-based, solution-oriented. So good. Listen, that was like such a bing moment in communicating for me. And I hope for you guys as well, because that doctor, we're gonna have to tweet that out somewhere.
I agree that was fantastic. And what I liked about it as well was Dr. Cranla, as the employee, she took the lead. She was empowered. She came prepared. She had thought through, how she would communicate this, and had even identified what the next steps were. So I really like that, the empowered way that you led that conversation.
Thank you. And I'm seeing Marie Clark Walker's comment, and most don't speak up. That's the challenge.
Yes.
That's the challenge. So a lot of the work I do, especially with women in the workplace, is support them through these kinds of things, these kinds of models. We work on self-belief, we work on values, and we work on how to have the conversation in a way that feels safe. So you're right, Marie, most people don't speak up. I mean, I'm very fortunate that this is work I've done for 30 years. And so I'd like to think I can apply it to my own life. And whenever I have a chance like this to offer and share and hopefully help somebody, I'm really happy to be able to do that.
We have to drink our own Kool-Aid. And if you can't drink your own Kool-Aid,
Yes.
don't share it to anybody else. If you don't know what Kool-Aid is, go look it up. I'm not going to tell you what Kool-Aid is. You can't drink your own juice. If you can't take your own medicine, don't share it with anybody else. And Janet Grant says in the chat here, sometimes stress is too much to handle alone. We need to have a strong network of family, friends, and understanding employers to manage the stress better. And like for me, this conversation, like, when we curated this conversation for today, people just say, having an interview. For me, this is a conversation. To me, I encourage anyone listening here, get a couple friends. Get a couple of your female friends, your male friends, people that you trust, that have some emotional intelligence and some wisdom, and have these conversations. Share what you're doing in your workplace. Create those safe spaces, because sometimes you may not have that safe space at work. You may not have a Dr. Cranlow or Michelle in your life that you have on speed dial, that I now have on speed dial. Yay, Nicole. And that I can say, I don't know how to navigate this. What is the type of wording can I use? And it's so important to have safe networks that you can speak to, that you can talk to. Okay, so I'm going in. We're going in. Okay. Now, how do you, let's be real here. Mental health and wellness, the stigma is there. It hasn't gone away. It's there. Why should we not feel that it is a thing to be weak when I have to say that I'm feeling stress or I'm feeling burnout? How do we address this stigma, Dr. Cranlow? You're on mute.
Okay. I think this is, are you hearing me now?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I think this is a really, really important topic, especially for those of us in the Black community. Because I know in the Black community, there's a belief that ongoing mental and emotional health challenges, they're inherent, they're part of our struggle. They're not really something that needs to be addressed. We need to just manage it. Mm-hmm. And often that can diminish the experiences of those who really may be struggling with their mental health, that may be buckling under the weight of stress. And there's also a belief in many Black communities that people who seek professional help for their mental and emotional or psychological issues have less faith in God. I've heard this, I've experienced this. So I counsel people that there's a place for both elements: spiritual, faith-based, and traditional professional intervention. And traditional sort of Western trained mental health professionals sometimes might reject the role of spirituality. I don't. I really try to integrate and marry the two. And we know scientifically that things like prayer and mindfulness, for example, can aid in decreasing stress and can help promote an overall sense of calm and well-being. And in order to destigmatize, we have to talk about it.
Yes.
We have to feel a comfort level to be able to say, this is what I'm going through. So back to friends and family, it's who do you trust, do you feel will hear you and understand what you're going through and allow you to talk about it.
I love that. And Michelle, if we can hear from you quickly on this one.
I agree with everything that Dr. Cranlow said. It's a really tough one, and we do recognize Bell Let's Talk Day every January at the hospital, just to remind people again, it's okay to bring forward issues around mental wellness, mental health. I think the other part of it is role modeling, have leaders, acknowledge it, acknowledge their own struggles and their own issues. And we also have to support leaders and educate them as to how to respond, how to react.
Yes.
When someone brings us forward. What vocabulary do you use? What supports are available? So I think that it's a really important point, and it's something that we're still grappling with.
Yeah, I have some additional thoughts on this, because if we think about the fact that when you think about the stats, like 80% of people will experience a diagnosable mental health condition in the course of their lifetime, we do need to talk about it. We need to work collectively to destigmatize and de-shame discussing mental health, so people will come forward sooner. I'd like to see us all learn, we talked about empathy before, right? Learn an empathetic and supportive approach to mental health challenges. The way that we approach the situation if someone's having a heart attack. No one says, oh, that's all in your head, it's going to pass. No, people jump to action, they perform CPR. And there is a thing called mental health first aid. I'm actually certified in mental health first aid. And I'd like to see more people trained in mental health first aid and have it be commonplace, the way that people learn CPR. And then for longer term, mental health challenges, look at that like somebody who has a broken leg who's in a cast. They're going to need help. Someone may need to open the door. They're going to, I think that's the biggest part for me. And we won't ever be able to address the topic of mental health and mental illness until we are openly and freely discussing it in a way that people talk about physical illness, or the way people talk about COVID. We were talking about the pandemic, it becomes part of our everyday conversations. So it's really important that people learn the signs of mental health challenges, that we've been discussing today, stress, chronic stress, that could lead to burnout or anxiety. And early detection and intervention are really going to be the key to get to the point where we need people speaking up and seeing mental health conversations as necessary and not a sign of weakness.
Yes. So much, such a rich conversation. I mean, we're getting ready to wind down. And, I just say to individuals, go online, look for some information. The Canadian Mental Health Association, they have a list of resources that you can probably pull from just learning about mental health and wellness, knowing that as we talked earlier in the conversation with Dr. Cranler, it's about your brain health, your mind health, your thoughts. Look up some good podcasts, maybe on mental health and wellness. You may not have time to read a book. What are you doing for yourself? How are you starting your day? What are you doing to self-soothe, to self-love? I started this conversation, and if you came in at the beginning, that is, if you didn't come in, go and rewind. And I have my candle, and I have my little love heart, and I have my flowers. This is a flower actually from the 100 ABC Gala that I still have. It's a brain flower, and it reminds me of the brain, how important my brain is. And I have to take care of my brain, and I have to stop, and I have to pause, and I have to say no to others. And strong Black women, if the laundry doesn't get done today and it doesn't get folded, it's okay. If the dishes don't get done, it's okay, because you are going to work and you're going. And Dr. Cranler, you were so good in sharing your own personal stories, Michelle as well, and how to negotiate and how to talk. Some people don't have unions, some don't. You talked about flight or fright. People, go look it up. It's really good to go look up flight or fright. We don't have enough time to go into that, but because it's the response to fear. It's a response to stress, things that we just do naturally that we don't even know. What is your nutrition? Do you have a nutritionist? Are you talking to your doctor? Dr. Cranler spoke to us also about it can show up in your bodies. You may be thinking that you have weight gain and it's just natural weight gain. Is this tied to your stress? Is your heart condition tied to your stress? Are other things showing up? It could also show up in your eyesight. If I remember, see, I'm remembering, Dr. Cranler. Aren't you proud of me? It can show up in your eyesight. It can show up in just that you just don't have the energy, And so go do the blood work. Go to the doctor, say, I need this. Get your massage. Get your massages in. And listen, if you think you can't afford to do it, what is it that you need to stop? What is it? Can you cut back in? You can find a good masseuse for $50. If you don't know where, DM me and I'll tell you where to go. And you don't have to spend $150 at a spa. Do something for you. So as we wind down this conversation, I'm going to get a little upfront and personal with Dr. Cranler and Michelle here. What are your non-negotiables in your life that, as you have the things that you do to deal with your stress? I know one of the things you said, Michelle, earlier on is that in the morning, the first thing that you do, you have your prayer group. What are the other non-negotiables in your life that you do to maintain a good stress life? What was that word? Wait. It wasn't balance. It was
Integration. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, go.
Yeah, you really have to be intentional. So we've had this prayer group, as I said, since 2021. And then I, about 6 months into it, I actually put it into my calendar as an entry. So if you look at my phone, you'll see daily meeting every single day at 7 a.m. so that no one would ever book anything. That's kind of early to book a meeting, but just to really make it intentional. And I do that throughout the day. I try to protect space in my calendar throughout the day. I'll just put no bookings, because I find that there's so many meetings now, one after the other, and so you don't even have time to think, let alone go to the bathroom, right? So sometimes I would put, no bookings. So the prayer group is one, and family. I'm there for my kids, 2 kids and 2 grandkids. And, we talk about everyone's experience is different. So in March 2020, when the pandemic was declared and we had all of this stuff going on at work, how do we keep everyone safe? My daughter was 8 months pregnant with her first child, who was born in April 2020. Wow. My son is a pilot. He had just relocated from his job in another province to accept a job here in Ontario, where he was to start training about 2 weeks after the pandemic was declared. He was immediately unemployed because there was nothing happening from an aviation perspective. So all of that was part of me, like what was contributing to my own stress. Work was just, a small piece of it. I was worried about my daughter and having this baby, and I couldn't be there with her. And what was the hospital going to be like when, and my son, how is he going to be depressed because he's not working?
Right.
So, and because I try to tune into my own personal experiences, I then try to be empathetic and think, well, if this is, what's going on in my life, there's a good chance that other people have similar things. I'm not unique. Other people have similar things going on in their lives. And we have to be empathetic and sensitive to that when we're dealing with our staff.
I like that. And I love that I remember you talked about taking your daily walk. And I love how you put it in. It's not available because so many of us, I don't do it. I don't do this calendar thing, but some people have to do it in their workplaces. Share your calendars. I don't share my calendar with anyone because if I need to make an adjustment, I'm making the adjustment. But I love
Mhm.
the fact that you put no book, no meeting, because the wording is important. The wording is so important. So, Dr. Cranlow, what are your non-negotiables? Tell us.
Yes, I really like this question. So I saw in the chat that someone talked about breathing, and that is what I start my day with. I know that sounds silly, we're all breathing, but I start my morning with intentional breathing, just like I was saying, the let go, because it's easy for me with a full calendar to get up and start going through my calendar of all the things I have to accomplish that day.
Mhm.
Instead, I start with a stretch and that deep breathing. And I also take a moment to just get mindful around what will energize me for the day, which sounds strange because a lot of what's been written about is there's a book called First Eat That Frog. Tackle the biggest thing you have to do for the day first. That doesn't work for me. What works for me is to tackle the thing in the day that's going to give me the most joy and the most energy. And right after that, I'm going to be able to tackle the most hairy, audacious, big thing. And then I have a mindset and energy to do that. And similar to Michelle, in terms of blocking the calendar, I block lunch for an hour in the middle of my day. Sometimes I move it around depending on what I want to do.
Right.
And I had shared with you that sometimes people try to book meetings and I just decline the meeting and they're like, I have to meet with you. Well, you won't be meeting with me during that time that I have blocked off. That's for me. So I might go for a walk, I might stretch, I might watch a show, I might eat lunch. I don't know, whatever it is I need that day. And I'm big on boundaries as my example that I shared with you. There's a lot of things I say no to. People ask me to speak at different things or to create a program for this and that. And sometimes it's not going to work for me. Maybe it's not aligned with my values. So that's easy, but it's not something that's going to manage it within my calendar and allow me to have the energy for the things I want to do. I also have grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren. I want to be energized Nana for them. So I think it's really taking control as much as you can over your schedule and your life and how you want to show up and where you want to show up.
I love this. And I'm looking, the boundaries are so good. The values, so good. What are the values that you hold dear that no one should get into? And when you mentioned your grandchildren, I can't believe you're a grandmother of three children. You must have had, I don't know, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. But, it reminded me, if we as Black women in particular don't take care of ourselves, what are we teaching our daughters?
Yes.
What are we teaching our grandchildren? And then if you have sons, hold on, people, put on your seatbelt, put on the oxygen mask, because I'm going in. What are you teaching your sons to expect from their black partners? We need to stop it. We need to stop this thing of you have to do everything. You are just a human. You need to breathe. And I love how you said breathing. Some people think it's silly, but I remember in the George Floyd, when it came, I did a this podcast that I do came out of the pandemic. And I remember I said, are you breathing? Because we're going through the
Yes.
day and we know we're alive, we know we're breathing, but we're not consciously breathing and we're holding our breath. So I challenge anybody today, even if you go back to the beginning of this, if you miss the beginning, do that 1 minute breathing. Do it for yourself. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your heart. Don't want to do it for your heart, do it for your children or your grandchildren. I'm just going to wind down with a couple of the comments in the chat. Dr. Cranla, Janet Grant says, thank you for sharing your personal experience and approach. I just love the communication roadmap. I like, and Mary Clark Walker says, I like what you've laid out, Dr. Warren. However, not everyone is able to do this, but for people who are marginalized, and that's when we talk about the flight or fright thing. But Dr. Cranla, I love that you were able to share the verbiage of how one can approach it. And if you can't find the people to approach it, if you have people like who Michelle has a union or you're non-union, that's where if you're unionized, you have some support in unionized spaces. Donna Jones Cinnamon says, Michelle, how are the healthcare staff dealing with the burnout? I feel their pain, especially with the new respiratory diseases. And I know we don't have time to go into that. So Donna Jones Simmons, can you set up another 100 ABC Fireside chat for us? Because we need to have that discussion. How are we going to show up for our healthcare workers? How are we showing up for ourselves in this next this wave that is here? And, our children. Irina says, thank you. And she's going to pass this along to her daughter. Thank you, Irina. Cheryl B. King says, I love the suggestion of starting your day at as little as 5-minute breathing. And, Janet says, thank you. It's a great session today. Timely. Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. I hope you have taken some of the thoughts and the great knowledge and wisdom shared by Dr. Cranla and Michelle today. I personally wrote some notes, and share it with your employers, put it in their DMs. If you want to share it on LinkedIn, wherever you need to share it, on Instagram, drop it in as a Christmas gift. This is a good Christmas gift. I'm just saying, recognize your body's reactions to yourself. I would say to you today, if you did one thing for yourself, sit in the moment after this conversation. Don't go do anything else. And recognize, how have I been dealing with my stress? Have I been loving to myself? What can you do today to show yourself some self-care, some self-compassion? Go in that mirror and say, I love you. I love you, Nicole. I love you, Janet. Just go to yourself. Eat something good. And it doesn't have to be always healthy. I'm not, keep it real. Sometimes we need chocolate. Chocolate's a vegetable. It comes from cocoa. That's on a tree. I'm just saying. So we are going to have another fireside chat next week. It's happening every Saturday at 3 p.m. and it's put on by 100 ABC Women. You have two of the fabulous 100 ABC Women here with you on the show today. Actually 3, because I'm one of them. I'm 2018. Next week, the conversation is on harmonious leadership, which talks to the future of sustainable leadership, where people are first and leaders serve with empathy with a focus on wellness. And I know one thing that came out of my many board meetings this week was people before profit. So let's put our people first, put your family first, say no to others so you can say yes to yourself. This is Nicole Waldron, your voice of victory and your mental fitness coach, along with Dr. Cranla Warren and Michelle James, wishing you light, love, peace, and hope. And have a Merry Christmas. And be sure to follow them on social media. Follow 100 ABC Women. If you have other questions you would like them to answer, send us a DM. Go follow us. And tune in. We have our book. Go look at it. Go to the website, 100abcwomen.ca. It was a pleasure being with you here today on this amazing Sunday on stress and burnout. And we hope that you never get burnout and you will take your pain and turn it into power and be your best self. Have a vision for your health. Be intentional about it. Cultivate it so the transformation can happen. Put some order and give yourself some ovation. Rest and say yes. Yield to the process and you'll have the victory. Take care.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment. have reached your destiny.